Okay, we're going 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to Cultivated Live for Monday, November 3rd. Sorry, I'm in Toronto. We're still hungover and disappointed from the World Series. So we're just getting our bearings post-baseball season and sort of early days hockey season. We're here today with my co-founder, our editor-in-chief, Jeremy Burke. And in the middle is Aaron Miles. He is the Chief Investment Officer at Verano. Aaron, you probably haven't had anything going on in the past week.
No, it's been pretty quiet. So, but I'm really excited to be here, Jay and Jeremy. So thanks for having me on. But cannabis is a space where you never expect to rest, and you never know what tomorrow's going to hold. And I actually don't think I would have it any other way. So.
Well, you could say that, but wouldn't it be better if it was just quiet for like 15 minutes?
Maybe. How about that? Maybe a little bit more predictable. How about that?
So, fair enough. Well, I'm going to kick things off because I think the sort of big headline in the news was Verano and Vireo settling. Talk a little bit of what that means, what it means for you as a company, what it means. I don't care if you want to talk about them, what it means for them, what it means for you, and does it make your inbox quieter moving forward?
Yeah, it does. It was definitely an overhang on the company and the stock in general. Litigation in general is always taken seriously, right? And we were tremendously confident in our case. And, as a quick background, we were going to acquire Vireo, which was Goodness Growth, at the time back in January of 22. And, per certain, breaches of the contract, we terminated the deal. And then Vireo turned around and sued us for $1 billion Canadian. And so over the last 3 years, we've been working through the mechanics of, that lawsuit. And so the management teams have changed. We worked really well with this new management team. And I think for both sides, it made a lot of sense to, kind of put this to bed, and we now can both focus on the respective businesses. Because, a lot of times I would get into an investor meeting or call with an analyst, and that's the first question you get. And you want your first question to be about the performance and the capability of your business, not an overhang like that. So we were tremendously excited to get this done. We settled for $1 million of cash, and we transferred an empty building that was non-operational. So we didn't anticipate any impact to the operations of the business. So I think it was feasible on both sides, and we're just tremendously happy to get this off our plate.
Yeah. Aaron, let me ask the sort of dumb or simple question here and talk a little bit about you. So your title is Chief Investment Officer. What does that really mean for your day-to-day, right? Especially in the cannabis industry, where investment dollars are scarce and liquidity is tight. I'm sure you have to manage all that. So talk to us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like as Chief Investment Officer, and maybe what you're working on this week.
Sure. In a lot of ways, I can't be a traditional chief investment officer, right, because we don't have all the capabilities that are available to us, but we're going to continue to work on putting those pieces together. So for me, I grew up in investor relations, M&A, communications, and so that rolls under my umbrella. I have a great communications team, Steve Mazeka, Grace Bondi, and Kendra Conway. They do a phenomenal job on the communication side. But for me, I oversee basically us as a company communicating to investors. And then I also, oversee a lot of the M&A strategy and how we position ahead of U.S. capital markets inclusion. So if you look at it right now, like, I'm not talking to Fidelity, I'm not talking to T. Rowe and Wellington, right, but I will be at some point, right? And so how we position the company is, we can make moves right now. So what I work on, Jeremy, from a day-to-day is how can we best position Verano? And if you go back a couple of years, we moved from the CSE to the CBOE Canada. Not a sexy move by any means. It's not, wasn't a big headliner, but what it did is it put us on a senior exchange, and it aligned us. We had to, write opinion letters in each market that we were in. We're not on a junior exchange anymore. We're on a senior exchange. So now you're starting to look at, okay, that better aligns us with the U.S. capital markets. What we just did last week, we re-domiciled or got approval to re-domicile from BC into Nevada, pending strike, the strikes being over in Canada and people being able to stamp final papers. We'll be able to finally make that move. But those are moves that, like, I work on, right? Like I was reading an article about Shopify, and they're a Canadian-based company that trade in the
Yep.
US, and they're having trouble getting inclusion into the Russell 2000. So when I think about my world and I think about what we want to be included in, I want to make sure that we're not missing anything. So I work on capital markets. I'm smiling and dialing. I will literally call anybody to see if they'll have a conversation with me from an investor perspective. And then from an M&A perspective, I have a Rolodex that I've put together, and we're wanting to, expand our footprint, go deeper in certain markets. And to be honest, we work on everything as a company. George is not your traditional CEO. He wants everyone involved, and he's not a tyrant dictator where he just tells us what to do. And so we have a lot of input on a lot of stuff, HR stuff and operations and stuff like that. So I wear a lot of different hats, but mainly focus on capital markets, M&A, and how we're positioning ahead of U.S. capital markets inclusion.
Can we dive into that? And I know there's only so much you can say, but dive into that. Sort of where are you thinking about sort of with the legal issues behind, sort of a fresh perspective? Like, what do you think about in terms of M&A? Is it sort of market driven? Is it expanding footprints you already have in certain markets? Like, how in your role are you looking at this, at opportunities? Is it market based? Is it brand based? Is it both? Assets?
Yeah, I think it's kind of probably everything, right? I think back in the day you had the green rush. Everybody, we couldn't spend money fast enough to build your footprint. And now I think people are taking more of a methodical, slower approach to how they evaluate M&A opportunities. We're in no hurry to get anything done. And we have been extremely patient. We're patient, but then we're not patient, right? When we went public from 21 into early 22, we got 16 acquisitions done. And then, we were kind of quiet for a little while, but that's also kind of in conjunction with where your stock's trading at. We can't dilute at these levels, so you have to get very creative on how you can structure certain deals. But last year, we were able to work really well with the cannabis company, and we bought Virginia and Arizona from them, and we were able to structure that deal that made sense on both sides. And actually last quarter in 2Q, we announced that we were able to retire part of the seller's note at a discount, which saved us about $4 million. So we're always looking for ways to structure deals and to save money as a company. But from an M&A perspective, Jay, we're looking at everything. We are very strong players in 13 markets, and you look at markets like Arizona and Nevada and Massachusetts and New Jersey and Illinois and PA and all these stuff. We have opportunity to continue to strengthen our footprint there. And what we have to do is sift through kind of some of the imposters right now. A lot of companies are in kind of desperation mode, and to acquire assets and clean them up and have to get that back into your portfolio can take some work. So, we're in the evaluation stage. We're always having conversations. We've never been shy about our M&A strategy, but we're also hyper patient, and we love where we're at from both a footprint perspective. And I think some of the investments we're making, which, showed up in the quarter and had a little bit of a margin impact, but we are investing in our footprint to create as much efficiency across the board to get ahead of markets like Virginia. Spanberger is leading in the polls, and she has, in August talked about working with the assembly to get cannabis across the finish line. That could be a huge market for us. So we got to make sure we're not missing anything. So.
Yeah. Aaron, I want to dive in on the footprint question and sort of from a bigger macro perspective. Progress toward legalization in a lot of states is slowing down, frankly, right? Pennsylvania wanted to move this year. It's not looking like it's going to happen before the end of this year. Florida it fits and starts, sort of fumbling towards another adult use ballot question, but we'll see what happens. So how do you look at the geographic landscape, and what to you are positive signals and I guess on the other side, negative signals?
Here's the thing. It's easy to get frustrated in this space. And here we are, we're like, when's Trump going to brush his teeth and reclassify cannabis to Schedule 3? But you have the president of the United States talking about cannabis. Go back 5 years, right? Nobody knew what the acronym SAFE stood for, or MORE Act, or any of the stuff. So you think about how much progress we've made as an industry. We're pretty far down the line. And so I think just from an overall perspective, I think we've made a lot of progress. And so I think if something happened at the federal level, I think that starts to ease up the path for Florida. It eases up the path for PA, and maybe states like Nebraska and Wisconsin start to implement programs. And so, what we see is that, Virginia, it's frustrating that Youngkin vetoed twice. The people have wanted it twice. They voted for it twice, but it's still there. That possibility is still there. And now you're starting to see the tide change. And again, it looks like Spanberger is going to get in, and that is going to be a positive for this industry. And you look at like our footprint in Virginia, like we have the Virginia Beach, basically HSA. That's a huge vacation area, high foot traffic, and you think about what recreational could look like in that state. It's massive. And the people of Florida, it didn't pass, right? Okay, it's frustrating, but it got 56% of the state to vote yes. So you're like, okay, it didn't pass, but you have the bulk majority of the state saying, yes, we want this to be legalized. And so if you can just ease that, because the irony of Florida too is like when they put that 60% ballot in place, the 60% didn't even get 60%. So it's like it passed getting north of 50, and then it got this 60% benchmark. And so I think what you're starting to see is, I think the positives are you're seeing positive momentum in Florida. You're seeing positive momentum in VA. Pennsylvania is a wild card. I mean, what they're doing there and watching those tax dollars leave the state is just mind blowing to me. But you're seeing, potential moves. And the thing about PA, though, is if you remember when Arizona went online, it went online and it went online quick. Like it wasn't like this massive overhaul and it took a year to get the program up and running. Like Arizona, they snapped their fingers and then all of a sudden it was wrecked.
Similar with Missouri. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think Pennsylvania could be very similar. And so, we're seeing a lot of positives in the states that we're operating in. And you look at it like, we've never gotten ahead of ourselves from a regulatory perspective, but we did with Florida. We were pretty convinced that was going to flip. So the frustrating thing is that we spent tens of millions of dollars in that state kind of preparing for adult use. But the good thing is that we spent tens of millions of dollars in that state. So, if they start to gain some momentum and that does flip, I mean, we quantified it at one point that Florida could be probably $300 to $450 million of additional revenue on the top line for us. So, I mean, we are extremely well positioned in these states. And again, at the federal level, if you can just start to get any type of cooperation, get Schedule 3 across the finish line, you have 280E go away, which we've quantified for us at probably $80+ million in savings. And then you start to think about capital markets opening up. You start thinking about the $83 million of cash we have on our balance sheet earning interest. And it's just, I'm really excited for what the future holds, but I'm also not frustrated with where we're at because we've had to really, it's almost been a fist fight every day to get to where we're at, but we're starting to play well in the sandbox together here as an industry.
Aaron, can I ask you a question? Because we often talk about sort of capital markets, very restricted and people not wanting to invest in cannabis. Still, when you run through what you just ran through with us around Florida, around sort of looking at Arizona as a model for what PA could be, and like Virginia, like for people who are still on the sidelines, investors, like how convinced are they once you run through those things? Like, are they say, oh my God, I didn't know it was that big or that close or on the cusp. And if federal legalization happened, it opens up all these things. Like how much of it is it an education? And does it convince people, investors, institutions, and others to say, oh, this is something investable now versus I'm waiting to keep my powder dry?
I think, you look at it, like I work for the New York Stock Exchange and there's nothing in the bylaws that say they can't list us. Right? They're choosing not to list us because 99.9% repeating into perpetuity, certainty that they'll be okay. It's that 0.0 into perpetuity, 1% that they're worried about. And so it's the same thing with investors. You start to think about some of these buy side analysts, like they have so many companies that they need to evaluate. So if we're not investable, they're not necessarily going to be looking at us right now. But when I do walk them through that story, and that's just the cliff notes. I mean, we could start really diving into these different pieces and start talking about different levels of profitability. And I mean, it is such an investable industry. Verano is a leader in the space. And people look at us like this startup, like we're struggling, just, we've had some pricing compression, we've had normalization in markets, but like Verano's here and we're, hyper successful, in the space that we're operating in. I think it does, Jay, give people like that, wait a minute, is this real? You know what I mean? Because this is like, you think about the unicorns people talk about with billion-dollar valuation going public for the first time. I mean, we're kind of that industry. But I do think what happens is there's so many confusing headlines that are out there. You have McConnell, taking care of his tobacco buddies in Kentucky, and then all of a sudden they're converting that into hemp-derived THC, and people are getting sick. There's 1,000-milligram edibles being sold at gas stations, and then the cannabis industry is getting blamed for it. And we're like, no. We are the ones that literally are monitored from seed to sale. Like, our product is literally tested, no pesticides, all these things. So this is another good piece of information, Jeremy, we were talking about just kind of like positivity in the market is you're starting to see hemp being focused on. And I am not anti-hemp. I am anti them not having to follow the same regulations that we do. So if they want to play in the same sandbox as us, you have to get taxed in the same fashion. You have to have your product tested in the same fashion, and stop blaming, the cannabis industry for a lot of the headlines that hemp, is really creating, because we are a tremendously safe industry. I mean, obviously every product should be used, with consideration and caution, right? I mean, you got to be careful with anything you do, learn your limits, but cannabis is a tremendously safe industry. So I think if hemp got regulated more tightly, and you look at a market like Texas, when they threw some regulations in there, and they were like, our hemp industry is $2 to $4 billion. And I don't even know what the total hemp number is, because it's really hard to quantify. But states like Ohio are starting to tighten the reins. California is tightening the reins. Texas is tightening the reins. So, I mean, if hemp gets regulated, that could be also a bigger, boost for this industry.
Let me drill down on the hemp question, Aaron. Forward looking, from your perspective, Verano's perspective, and maybe the broader, MSO cannabis industry perspective, what would good hemp regulations look like for you, right? We spend a lot of time covering this, and there's a lot of opinions, a lot of very strong opinions. So from your perspective, how does this look, and how do you make it effective?
Yeah, I think you're seeing more issues with the flower and the edible side of the hemp equation, right? And so I think just starting from the quality of product would help kind of level the playing field. We're taxed much differently. In the state of Illinois, for instance, it's taxed on the level of THC in your product, and some of our products are taxed at 40%. I mean, it's insane, the amount of taxes. And then you go into a gas station, and they're in Michigan, and they're getting taxed 6%, right? And so I think, the fair regulation across the board is it's taxing, and maybe it's not hemp has to come all the way over to cannabis. Maybe there's a balance where it's like, okay, maybe we're overtaxing the cannabis space and we're undertaxing hemp, and let's find, a happy medium in the middle. But the flower that's hitting the market, the edibles that are hitting the market, have to be tested more thoroughly. And I think that in and of itself, really levels the playing field, because the reason Verano was successful, and let's go back to inception, right? When 2014, Illinois was one of the most strict markets to operate in. And the way that you were able, had to get your product into market was really, really difficult. And so when you can fine tune that, it made some of the other markets that were opening up for us much easier. And so I think it would be hard for the hemp industry to have to play in our sandbox right now. And so I think that would level the playing field. And I think there, probably will be some level of a hemp-derived beverage carve out. Like, I think that's a market that makes, a lot of sense, and something we've looked into, like nothing we've announced. But I do think the flower side of hemp and the edible side of hemp, it's just not the same quality of product, and there are some concerns that I have over that. So I think if you level that playing field, I think that could be a big boost for the cannabis space.
Yeah, I actually think some of the things you just said, when we talk to sort of hemp derived brands, CEOs, like, they're basically saying the same thing,
right?
Because the same issues you have certainly with edibles and untested products and selling gas stations, they're dealing with the same thing, and they are sort of slice of the industry too, and they want to be proper players and taxed at right rates and regulated, frankly, so they can do away with sort of, my words, not theirs, like riffraff.
Yeah. Well, look what happened in Minnesota. I mean, they passed that hemp derived bill, and then I think they literally had like a wait a minute, what did we just do moment? And you're like, you just signed intoxicating hemp into law, like, and you start to think about this as well. Like, we can't market, we can't advertise, we can't ship products, like, we can't do things on Amazon, we can't, so you think about all the limitations we have in this market. And you think about it, at the end of the day, like, when I sit across from an investor, they're like, what's the biggest boost for this industry? And I'm like, this is going to be the most boring answer you've ever heard in your life. just to be a normal company. Like I just want to advertise. I want to have federal banking. I want to be on the, NYSE or NASDAQ. I want just being normal would be a massive boom. Credit cards. I mean, what does basket sizes look like if we got credit cards? And
right.
So I just think there's some unfair advantages with the hemp space versus, kind of where we're at. But we're fighting a good fight, and we're tremendously positive on what we see, steps going forward. But we take nothing for granted. At the end of the day, we have to continue to position our company ahead of those opportunities and make sure we're not missing anything. And so, Jeremy, kind of going back to your initial question, it's like I'm constantly taking a step back and being like, what am I missing? And again, there's a pride of ownership, and we put our heads together and make sure that, like, as a company and as an industry, we're not missing out on anything.
Yeah, Aaron, I think this was great. It's great, so good to connect with you and hear sort of. Certainly where we started, sort of about the lawsuit, but also forward-looking and thinking about the market as it exists right now, where you're thinking about M&As, geographies, markets, brands, the hemp conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground in 20 minutes and 52 seconds now. We hope we can have you back on. If not next week, sometime down the road, as things continue to unfold on a federal level, state by state level. Once Pennsylvania becomes clear they're not doing it this year, we can have you back to sort of lament that as well. But we appreciate the time, and we will have you back on in no time. Thanks so much.
No, I definitely appreciate it. And anytime, I really liked being on here and appreciated the chat today. So hope you have a good one. And Blue Jays next year, I can feel it. So
yeah, we hope. God,
I'm a born Red Sox fan. I know that that's not happening. So I told my kid it might be 20 something years before they get back. So enjoy every second of this.
God.
Oh man. Well, on that note. So,
bye,
thank you, guys.
Bye.